Now, he was one of the greatest fashion designers of his generation who dressed some of the world's biggest celebrities, including the actresses Nicole Kidman and Penelope Cruz. Alexander McQueen may have been regarded as the bad boy of haute couture, but his wild creativity and bold use of fabric was a statement of irresistible decadence. His suicide at the age of 40 left the fashion world reeling. But 5 years on, his legacy is celebrated in the show Savage Beauty at London's Victoria and Albert Museum. The exhibit displays both McQueen's epic talent, his love of Gothic, and the influence of Africa. Well, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined in the studio by Katie Bethune. She's the Senior Research Assistant who's been involved in the Savage Beauty exhibition at the V&A. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I mean, he has been depicted as the enfant terrible of fashion and as a genius, but what else made him so unique, and did he like those titles?
I think he did. He was quite provocative, but I mean, McQueen really changed the way that people look at fashion. He made it interesting to people who aren't necessarily interested in it, and he really pushed the boundaries with his radical visions and his limitless imagination and working without restraint.
Why did he feel it was important to change the way that people perceive fashion? Was it a mission call for him?
Yes, I mean, he was very bold with his messages. Often his collections were very provocative. For example, his Voss collection, which ended with a tableau of a Joel Peter Witkin photograph called Sanitarium. It was a very transgressive catwalk moment. But for McQueen, there was always a strong point of view. He always had something to say. And that collection in particular was about changing the way people think about fashion and beauty.
And when you look at some of the pieces that he designed, they're almost like works of art rather than things which are wearable and indeed can't really be worn. Was that very deliberate?
Yes, I mean, for McQueen, it's arguably true that he was an artist whose medium of expression was fashion. He worked without restraint to create these extraordinary designs. He had such artistry with the materials that he used. He didn't just render his designs in fabric. It was plywood, it was glass, it was mussel shells, it was glass microscope slides, for example. He really astonished.
That he could find beauty in the most unconventional materials.
Absolutely, and to challenge people's perceptions as to what is beautiful and what is feminine, to create these extraordinary statement pieces. He wasn't driven by commerciability, he was driven by ideas and concepts. And for him, so much of about what he did was the shows. He was a masterful showman and a masterful storyteller, and it was creating these iconic statement shows that involved avant-garde installation art that really stood him apart.
And that's the interesting thing as well, that he was commercially successful even though he was using unconventional materials and actually approached fashion design from a completely different perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, everything that he did was underpinned by craftsmanship of the highest level. He was trained on Savile Row. He was a masterful tailor. But although he drew on a rich historical tradition and historical dress, he subverted it. He fused modernity and tradition to create these incredible silhouettes. For example, the Bumster trousers, you know, an iconic trouser design that redefined the torso and the silhouette by raising that waistband below the hip line to expose the lower spine. They caused a sensation in the early 90s, and they appeared again and again in his early collections.
And the sensation aspect still continues to this day. But also as well, he was fascinated by Gothic and Romanticism. Did he often fuse the two together, or did he treat them as separate cultural forms?
No, I mean, he very much worked, duality is very much present in his work. He fused that Gothic tradition with a romantic lens. His was a very Victorian type of Gothic. He was very much inspired by poets such as Edgar Allan Poe, and he was also drawn to the melancholia associated with the Gothic tradition. So there's this beautiful corset from his Dante collection, and it's the colour of lilac, which is the colour of half mourning, and it's overlaid with this exquisite jet embroidery and lace.
But do you think as well that given that he took his own life, that perhaps in some ways that darkness, the darker side of his personality was reflected on this? So it wasn't just a case of looking at an artistic form, it also spoke about something within him, his own psychology, that very sensitive side that people never saw because they judged him by the exterior brashness.
I think that's true to say. I think his designs are a lens into his mind and his mindset at times, and there was a very dark aesthetic that ran through his collections, but it wasn't always about darkness and it wasn't always sinister. There was often beautiful moments of lightness and optimism. The designs from The Girl Who Lived in the Tree, arguably the most lyrical collection, beautiful and majestic pieces that are embellished with Swarovski crystal. He had a very positive attitude towards death, and he said that it was an important part of the cycle of life because it gave room for new things to follow. So as much as there was a dark aesthetic, he was about transformation and regeneration.
What about the African influences? What was it about the continent, in particular tribes, that really drew him in?
Well, McQueen drew his references from diverse resources, and he loved other cultures. And Africa was one of the continents that he liked to reference in his collections, both in terms of animals. For example, one collection, It's a Jungle Out There, was about the Thompson's gazelle, and it was about the survival instinct, which was a metaphor for urban life, but also the fashion industry. And it involved lots of skin and horn and animal products. And then also another collection called Ishu. As I said, he told these amazing stories and narratives. Ishu was about a lady who moved in the Victorian period to Africa and settled there and embodied the culture.
So you've got the colonial reference there.
Absolutely. I mean, and you know, he had this respect for the materials that were found in Africa, the golds, the wooden jewellery, the neck braces. So he tried to use
the African materials. He deliberately went out of his way to source them.
Yeah, well, he worked in collaboration with a broad range of creatives, in particular the jeweller Sean Lean. So he asked Sean to create a neck brace that was akin to those worn by the Maasai and Ndebele tribes in sub-Saharan Africa.
Now, this exhibition has been going on now for some time, so given the vastness of his work, the sheer range, how difficult was it to decide, OK, we can take this bit from one particular phase of his life, this bit from another phase, and so on and so forth, to actually put something together which gives everybody a sense of his totality as a person, as a designer, to get into his head?
Well, the exhibition is organised thematically, so it draws on key aspects of McQueen's body of work, such as his Gothic sensibility, his fascination for other cultures, and above all, his deep interest in nature and the natural world. And we're really lucky that at the V&A we were able to enhance the curation. So it was originally on display at the Met in New York in 2011, but we've added 66 garments and accessories to the curation, so it's now the largest retrospective on McQueen and the most ambitious fashion exhibition the V&A has ever staged.
So you're confident in yourself that you have captured the gamut of his talent, you've captured everything about him?
Yes, I mean, there are many different lenses you can apply to McQueen, but I think applying that romantic lens and looking at all the different aspects that he was fascinated by has been a really, really useful tool for really conveying the totality of his creative output and the things that mattered most to him. I
said in my introduction that the fashion world was left reeling when he committed suicide because he died at the height of his success. Do you think there'll ever be another Alexander McQueen, or was he so unique that nobody could possibly follow in his footsteps?
It's very hard to say, but for McQueen, what makes him stand out among other designers is the fusing of the extraordinary level of craftsmanship in each of the designs, but also the showmanship, these spectacular shows that involved elaborate theatre, compelling narratives. They were really provocative and very shocking, and I think that's what makes him stand out, and that's why he continues to inspire a new generation of creatives. OK, Kate, we'll leave it at this point, but Savage Beauty continuing at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. You're watching This Day Live here on the Rise News.